message as the prompts have changed effective April 8, 2011. You have reached the AT&T Mobility Court Order Compliance Center of AT&T. If you're calling from a 911 emergency center, or if this is a life or death matter, press 4.
Dave, this is Judy. I work at the 911 Center at Cater County, Tennessee. We have got a missing 20-year-old female that was pulled away from her home. We need a trace put on her cell phone, please.
Okay, what's the phone number?
Okay, 731 549 7352.
Okay.
Her name is Holly Bobo, B-O-B-O.
Okay, that's 731-549-7352.
Yes, sir.
Okay, one And how old was the phone? Did she call 911?
No, sir. Her brother reported her missing. She was pulled away from her home and she was outside into the woods. And my sergeant, Tony Weber, requested me to call you and put a trace on her cell phone, please.
Okay. Now, did the brother call 911?
Yes, her brother reported her missing. She was in our home.
All right.
Yeah, 118, X-ray,
Your name is Judy, correct?
Judy,
What's the zip code of your station?
The zip code of my station is 38329. We're in the Decatur.
Decatur County 911?
Yes,
Okay, and may I have your callback number and your fax number?
Yes, my callback number is 731 852 3911, and the fax number is 731 852 3914.
No, there it is.
It's on Marshalltown Road at 2650
Location information on there?
I'm sorry?
Any location on the phone right now?
No, I don't have a location on the phone.
But you need
Yes,
location.
yes.
Okay, I can go ahead and provide the information to you quickly. I just need to record the conversation. And you can give the details on the party, the third party, and so forth.
Okay, so the only thing I can tell you is she was outside, to my knowledge. Her brother heard her screaming.
Right.
He looked out. There was a boy in camouflage clothing that pulled her into the woods. He heard her screaming, and I think a neighbor also reported her screaming.
Okay.
And it's around 8 a.m. this morning.
Okay, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and place on hold briefly. I'm going to issue the recording. When I come back, I'm just going to ask a few questions regarding how the call came into your office again, but to provide the information.
Okay.
Okay? Just a moment. recorded. I understand that I have your permission to record it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you verify your name, the name of your agency, and the callback number for me, please?
And yes, sir, my name is Judy Wilkins. I work at the 911 Center, Decatur County, Tennessee. Phone number is 731-852-3911.
Okay, thank you. Officer, we're going to receive a call from a second party reporting that our customer with the telephone number 731-549-7352 is possibly kidnapped.
Abducted,
Can you advise me who was on the phone referring to the agency? Approximately what time the call came in, and if you have the phone number of the third party?
Okay, sir, the reporting party was a current Bobo, that is her brother, called the 911 Center and reported his sister had been possibly abducted. She was screaming concerning a male with camo pulling into the woods. A neighbor also heard her screaming. Hold on a minute.
Sure.
Sheila, what time is this call coming? Is it 7:59? 7:59, I get it.
Well, the rest of that call, you're looking for official person in the daily of that,
Yes.
and you're requesting a location.
Yes.
Right? All right. I tried sending the phone to you. I'm not getting a location on the phone right now. It does not appear to be powered on. So unfortunately, we're not able to get any location information on the phone right now.
Okay, let me ask you one thing, sir. If you don't have a signal, what I call a signal in that area, will that affect it then?
Yeah, possibly. You know, I just did get a location. It's not it's giving me a pretty big radius here, but let me save that and finish on the question to see if I can get a
Not likely involved, but they're still looking for it. Okay. Right now, that's in the time to take it, some say that that's $7,000 coming in, but, I don't have much to say with the same party.
So the pretty sure that you have a few of it?
Pretty sure, yes, sir.
Let me give you what I've got here. I've requested a few times. I got
Some notes I have here. Your handwriting?
Some of it does appear to be my handwriting, yes, ma'am.
I think one of the problems with these notes is when they're copied, you can see a little bit of what was on the back of the paper also. But would you agree with me that it appears that these rough notes on the piece of paper I just handed you are the same information that eventually got transcribed into your supplement number 1 of your report?
I would say yes, ma'am. Some of them described into my report.
Would it be helpful if I passed you a copy of your supplement of your report?
That'd be fine, ma'am. Described into my.
And yesterday you testified, you kind of started with the sex offenders that were closest to the Bobo home. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the first person there, John Turner, number 1. It's probably.
His name is first on the list, so I would probably have to say it's.
And he lives on Eastwood. You know where Eastwood is. But I'm sorry, you located him at Melton Lane
Yes, ma'am.
in Eastwood.
Okay. The second person is on Manus Lane. That's close to the Bobo's house.
82350.
Okay.
12938.13375. That is a radius of 4,894 meters.
Okay, so I'll let you speak to that sergeant. Hold on just a moment.
It's David AT&T. I was given some long-term information to your dispatch. How can I...
Well, we're doing a track if possible if this thing moves or anything.
Okay, if you could just give me an email address, and I can start something getting an email in 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. T-letter, T-W-E-B-E-R.
Okay.
At NETUASE.net. To be NetEase.
Okay, so that's T-letter.NETEASE.net.
NetEase.net.
Okay, I'll get that set up for you. We'll get an initial email and then whatever 15 minutes after.
Okay, so you think this is hanging off your tower? Is that
Well, it's understood. The last training that I took has a location that looks like it's near a tower or location by Interstate 30. Okay. So, it's really hard to say. We're not getting a real precise location right now. It's giving us about a 2-mile radius. Okay. So, hopefully, if there's better signal, we'll get a more precise.
Okay. And then we're going to keep hanging in for 15 minutes?
Yes, I'll get that set up for you in a couple minutes there, and we're going to
have a number to call you back to when we make contact to cancel this?
Yes, it's 800-635-6840. Right, and when you hear our message, hit number 4 on the keypad, and then that'll put you over to one of our representatives. Okay, and then we're going to reference our file number, which is 916-870. Yes.
Okay, that's the number. All right, I sure appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, so that was an accurate reflection of the phone call that day. Is that right?
Sounded accurate, yes, ma'am.
And at some point, you heard the AT&T person give a location of Holiday Circle,
I heard him give a lot of locations, pings and numbers.
and the I guess the 911 operator was asking if they had an address, and he said, "Well, it was coming back with an address." And he was trying to give the closest address possible, and he said a Holiday Circle.
Okay.
And he also said at some point that the phone was pinging over by Interstate I-40.
Yes, ma'am.
And but at that time, you did not send a group of officers up that direction, did you?
No, ma'am.
Okay. As a matter of fact, once you got these two readings, the latitude and longitude readings, you didn't send officers to those readings, did you?
I relayed the information that I was given to officers to try to go to certain locations. Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. But as you know, officers did not go to those readings within the first hour.
Ma'am, I don't know. I was clearly at the dispatch center and obtaining the information as to what officers, or if any, went there. I don't know.
Okay. And then let me... And since yesterday, you had an opportunity to review the report that you prepared in this case, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am. I looked at it this morning.
And as a matter of fact, you, as the first officer on the scene, were charged with making the preliminary investigation report in the whole case.
Yes, ma'am. I have to start a case so we can have a case number for follow-up things, just like the AT&T track.
Okay. And so in your report that you filled out on the very first page under the accused, suspect, other category, you actually put Clint Bobo's name in there, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then on the second page, you wrote out a narrative.
Yes, ma'am.
And a narrative is just a brief paragraph of kind of what had occurred.
Just a brief summation, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you wrote this. Do you remember what day you actually sat down and wrote out the report?
No, ma'am. A lot of that stuff was kind of running together. I mean, there was a lot of things going on during that time.
So you're saying it was all kinds of information coming in?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And because of it all, it's possible that it was several days until you wrote out the report?
There may be a timestamp on the report. I don't know.
Okay. And if there's not a timestamp on the report, then no telling when it was actually typed into a computer?
It would have been there pretty quick. It's not going to be a week later or anything like that. It would have been within the first day or so, because other people are going to need that case number for their files also.
Okay. And you put down in your report that upon arriving at the scene, you spoke with the brother, Clint Bobo.
Yes, ma'am.
You reported the victim, Holly Bobo. Of the reported victim, Holly Bobo.
Sounds right.
Okay. And you're saying that Mr. Bobo gave you a verbal statement that he was asleep in the home and heard a scream.
If that's what I put down, that's what he told me. Yes, ma'am.
But it's possible that you got that part confused because it's the neighbor that heard the scream.
It's possible. It's in my report. Unfortunately, that's what I typed up, so that's what I have to stand by.
But you didn't have any specific notes from when you spoke to Clint Bobo first thing that day, did you?
No, ma'am. The statement form that I gave him, I don't know whatever happened to it.
Okay, so you would agree with me that whatever piece of paper you gave him that day to fill out has been lost at this point?
I would say that I never gained possession of it back at that day, no.
Okay, because you didn't review that paper in preparation for your testimony today?
No, ma'am. I have not seen that paper.
Okay. And so you also put down that Clint Bobo checked outside the home and he saw his sister in a pink shirt and light-colored blue jeans walking into the woods.
That's the description he would have given me.
Okay.
Sounds right.
But he had also told you that he had seen his sister kneeling down, speaking to somebody outside the window. Didn't he tell you that?
I don't remember that.
Okay, so it's a detail you don't remember today.
Yes, ma'am.
And Clint Bobo advised you he didn't think much about his sister heading into the woods with her boyfriend.
Seems like that's right.
Okay. He explained to you that the boyfriend was a turkey hunter.
I do recall that, yes.
At some point he realized what was happening and he called 911.
Yes, ma'am.
Upon the arrival at the scene, you put down that you did locate and photograph some blood inside the carport.
That's what I put, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So yesterday when you said you didn't take pictures, you did in fact take some pictures.
It says that. I don't know whatever happened to him, but it does say that. So I imagine I would have, probably on my cell phone, because that would have been what I would have had on me at the time. I don't carry around a camera with me, so.
And back in 2011, did you have a cell phone that took pictures?
It was a department-issued iPhone, yes, ma'am.
Okay. That part you remember.
What?
You remember that you had a cell phone, an iPhone that took pictures.
I remember that I had a department-issued iPhone. We all had them, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then it says that you went inside this home. And you're one of the people that cleared the house?
No, ma'am, I don't remember ever going in the home.
Okay, so it was only Jeremy Pratt that cleared the home?
I don't know that, ma'am. I did not go in the home.
Okay. And you tried to get a dog up there, but they told you that there was going to be a significant time delay on the dog.
I do remember trying to get a dog up there, but I don't remember being told. I did read that in my report this morning, so obviously somebody did tell me that.
Okay. And did you stay in your office to get the emails, or was that something you could get on your iPhone? The emails from AT&T with the pings.
I believe I had to use a computer there at dispatch, but I don't remember. I remember them coming in by email. So.
Okay. And a matter of fact, you were able to get 4 pings total, is that right?
I don't remember exactly how many, ma'am.
Okay, well, and I take that back. The very first locate on the phone that we heard there, that locate, there was no hit at the time. Did you?
I heard him say that, yes, ma'am.
And so then we heard 2 locates on the telephone just then.
Yes, ma'am.
And then they ended up sending you additional 2 more. Isn't that right?
Ma'am, again, I don't remember the number in total. I remember some emails coming through, but I don't remember how many.
Okay. And at that point then, you did not have the means by which to use this latitude and longitude information they gave you to pinpoint it on the map, did you?
No, ma'am, I didn't have a GPS or anything to use that information.
Okay. And it never occurred to you when you were talking to the people on the phone to ask them to update the system every 1 minute?
No, ma'am.
You did hear the man say on the phone that he was constantly refreshing the data to see if it had changed.
Ma'am, he never told me that.
You didn't hear him on the phone just now say that?
I heard him on there say that, but he didn't say that to me, so no, ma'am, I was not aware that you could do that.
Okay. At the very last, when he said to you, I've been refreshing, and then he said, oh, it's just changed, I've got a new reading for you. Did you remember him saying that?
I remember him saying that.
Okay. And then you did a supplement to your report at a later date. Isn't that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that supplement, you added all the sex offenders that you had gone to visit.
Yes, ma'am.
And you went to see sex offenders with Jeremy Pratt.
Yes, ma'am.
You teamed up together to do that.
We did team up for some of them. I think John Reichard, one of the other road sergeants, assisted with a couple also.
Okay. And so in doing that, I'd like to pass to you some papers I have. I have some copies, and granted they're not very good copy, of some notes I have here. Can you tell me if that's your handwriting?
Some of it does appear to be my handwriting, yes, ma'am.
I think one of the problems with these notes is when they're copied, you can see a little bit of what was on the back of the paper also. But would you agree with me that it appears that these rough notes on the piece of paper I just handed you are the same information that eventually got transcribed into your supplement number 1 of your report?
I would say yes, ma'am. Some of the information was transcribed into my report.
Would it be helpful if I passed you a copy of your supplement of your report?
That'd be fine, ma'am.
yesterday you testified that you kind of started with the sex offenders that were closest to the Bobo home. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the first person there that you go see is John Turner, number 1. It's probably easier if you look at the typed report.
His name is first on the list, so I would probably have to say it's about right.
Okay. And he lives on Eastwood. You know where Eastwood is. But I'm sorry, you located him at Melton Lane.
Yes, ma'am.
At Eastwood. Okay. The second person is on Manus Lane. That's close to the Bobo's house. Is that right?
I'm not sure mileage-wise, but it's within the city limits of Parsons, I believe. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that's Melvin Stegall. You checked on him.
Melvin Stegall. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, Seagull. The next person is Timothy Wheat,
Yes, ma'am.
also on Manus Lane.
Yes, ma'am.
Then is it Michael Broughton?
Yes, ma'am.
The fifth person is James Riddle.
Yes, ma'am.
He's on Rawson Lane.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then you move over to Jeanette Holiday Road.
Yes, ma'am.
And you know where Jeanette Holiday Road is located.
I do.
And it's close to the Bobo home.
Yes, ma'am.
It's certainly closer to the Bobo home than Adams Lane.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you checked on Eric Christensen.
That's what it says. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And he was home when you got there.
That's what it says.
And then the next person on the list is Terry Britt, number 7.
Yes, ma'am.
And he was at 3138 Jeanette Holiday Road.
Yes, ma'am.
He gave you his story of what he had been doing that day. He said he woke up at 6 a.m., wife woke up at 8:30-ish, and they left going to All Goods in Camden to buy supplies for remodeling the house.
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember that upon arrival, they were unloading, Jan and Terry Britt were unloading a tub from a truck?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you say truck, you mean a pickup truck.
Yes, ma'am.
And so you got there sometime that afternoon after approximately 2 o'clock, didn't you?
I don't remember the exact time, ma'am.
Do you see a time written on your sheet? On your handwritten notes? I couldn't find a time, but...
Ma'am, I'm struggling here. It's kind of copied over and it's hard to read, but not that I can tell, no, ma'am.
Okay. And do you remember that deputy, you had just mentioned another deputy who was also doing checks on sex offenders. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
And that other deputy, what was his name?
Jonathan Reichard.
And Mr. Riker, and he was paired up with a second person also, wasn't he?
Ma'am, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Okay.
I would say probably.
Okay. And so, do you remember that they had already been by the Britt home that morning and nobody was there?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And there's a list, a timetable that was included in all, well, I guess, officers, when they came in, then began to try to form some type of timeline and keep a record of who was doing what.
I would hope so.
And you remember that you worked pretty late that day.
I'm sure I did.
Okay. So if at 8:38 you were still out there checking sex offenders, that would make sense to you, wouldn't it?
I'm sure. I don't remember getting a whole lot of sleep there for about a week.
Okay. And that day also, you said that you had gone, you initially were at the Bobo home, but you left sometime that morning to go back to the Parsons, or the Decatur County Sheriff's Department.
The dispatch center, yes, ma'am.
And where is the Decatur County Sheriff's Department?
It's on Main Street in Decaturville. I don't know the numerical address.
Okay, so in order to get there from the Bobo home, you would have driven past the hospital, the Parsons Hospital. Is it Parsons or Decatur County Hospital?
Decatur County General Hospital.
So you would have driven past the Decatur County General Hospital going that direction?
That's one way to go, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that's the way you went that morning, isn't it?
I don't know, ma'am. I don't know which road I took. I would imagine I took that road just because it's the main thoroughfare.
Okay. If I can have one moment. No further questions, Your Honor.
Further director of the state.
Yeah, I have a few, Judge.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. I did want to put that phone call in as...
I wondered, let's put the disc in, it will be Exhibit 37.
Can we have his report put in also and his handwritten notes? He recognized them as...
I'm sorry.
With regard to that, I'd like to address the court with regard to introducing Nancy's report. I'm getting the disc from Mr. President.
Disc will be Exhibit 37.
I'll get it. We're gonna have to take that home.
You want to be heard on that?
Yes, no approach.
Yes, bring that with you. Tell the jury those two reports that have just been filed as evidence were introduced for purposes of him refreshing his recollection. They're hearsay and not to be considered for the truth of it. Okay? All right.
Which one is going to be 38?
The big one was, or the multi-page was on top, I think. And 39 is practically illegible.
Mr. Park, may I continue, Your Honor?
You may.
I think you told us yesterday you're not a cell phone expert.
No, sir.
That wasn't your job.
No, sir, it was not.
So I'm not going to try to make you one, okay? But did you hear what I heard on that phone call?
Yes, sir, I did.
AT&T guy couldn't give you an address, could he?
No, sir.
He couldn't tell you Holly's phone was here,
No, sir.
at a place or on a road or anything like that.
No, sir.
Object to the leading.
No, sir, he could not.
I'll be mindful of it, Judge. And
Okay.
instead, what did he tell you?
Latitude and longitudes of possible locations.
And did you hear him mention something about like a radius?
Yes, sir. 4,000 kilometers, approximately 2 miles, I believe is what I heard him say.
Approximately 2-mile radius.
Yes, sir.
So you're talking about a 2-mile swatch
Yes, sir.
and not a place or a road.
No, sir.
Did you hear him say anything about a city?
No, sir.
Did you hear him ever mention Holiday, Tennessee?
Not that I recall, no, sir.
Did you ever hear him mention Interstate 40?
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you know, you were asked where Adams Lane is?
Yes, sir.
And do you know who lives on Adams Lane?
Yes, sir, I do.
Who?
Zach Adams and his grandfather.
Adams Lane near Interstate 40?
It is, sir.
It's right there, isn't it?
It's pretty close, yes, sir.
Adams Lane near Holiday, Tennessee?
Yes, sir, it is.
Right there, right?
Yes, sir, it is.
Now, even though you aren't a cell phone expert, and they gave you these pings, they emailed you pings, right?
Yes, sir, they did.
Did you just ignore them?
No, sir. We gave the information to people that I thought would be useful to them.
Because that was your job.
Yes, sir.
Did TBI get them?
They did. Yes, sir.
Highway Patrol?
Highway Patrol did also. Yes, sir.
Other people responsible for trying to find them.
Other people that were trying to help us. Yes, sir.
And you went about your job.
Yes, sir, I did.
There was a list of sex offenders you talked to.
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
I object to the leading.
Yes, sir, there is.
That was not leading. Overruled.
Did you talk to Terry and Janet Britt?
I did. Yes, sir.
You saw them that morning. Is that right?
Yes, sir. At some point during that day, I did run into them.
And you were asked, you saw them doing something. Is that right?
When we
Your Honor, I object
Right, that
to...
is leading.
What did you see when you encountered them?
When Deputy Pratt and I pulled up into the driveway of the Britt's home, they were outside unloading a pickup truck with some remodeling supplies to their home.
Okay. Previously, the word tub was used. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
What do you mean by that?
A bathtub.
Okay. Stuff for the bathroom?
That's what it appeared to be. Yes, sir.
Okay. Not like a big bucket or something like that.
No, sir.
You did all that after you had actually been at the crime scene where she was taken, right?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
And we talked about this yesterday, didn't we?
Yes, sir.
Takes a second, Judge, sorry.
The light box, okay, here we go.
While we wait for it to warm up, did you describe for us that one of your things you did out there was put up some crime scene tape?
Yes, sir, I did.
Now, were you the crime scene officer?
I was the initial officer on scene, sir.
Do you know what I mean by that? That's when I say crime scene officer?
A tech that examines...
Absolutely.
No, sir, I'm not.
You weren't doing that?
No, sir.
You weren't taking samples of blood?
I was not.
You weren't walking every step of the crime scene, putting tape and everything?
Your
No, sir.
Honor, I object to the leading.
No.
Sustained.
Did you put some tape up, though?
I did at one point, yes, sir.
If we can just resume the lights, Judge, I'll pass him this and we can, we'll figure it out over the next break.
Okay.
My pass you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 7.
Yes, sir.
All right. Do you see the tape that you put up?
I see some crime scene tape, and that's the area that I put it up. Yes, sir.
Okay. Can I have my first witness, Your Honor? My first witness. Can you show me the tape in the area that you put up?
Yes, sir. Over here next to, there's an alleyway going down the carport. All right. Over here would be the door walking down into the carport where Holly's car would have been. Just to the left of that, there was some sort of decoration, and then the door going into the main entrance of the home on the back side. I tied the tape between there, strung out through here, and back over to a brush, small tree on the back corner of this right here.
Okay. And would you agree with me that you put tape that stretched from the porch or from the carport, I guess it's more the porch than the carport, all the way across this back area to a tree or something?
I did carried it all the way across to the shed back here where you can see Clint Bobo's truck. I was trying to preserve this area just in case, because we'd already observed the blood on the carport, or in the carport, I should say, and then the spatter on the wall. So I was trying to preserve this area just in case there might have been some sort of indication of a trail of which way they had left outside of that area.
On the other side, it spans from some trees or something over next to the carport all the way across to the other trees.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Would you agree with me that you didn't put any crime scene tape across the mouth of that carport?
No, sir, I did not.
If somebody put crime scene tape across the mouth of that carport, that would not have been you?
No, sir, it would not.
Might I display this to the jury?
You may.
Just State's Exhibit number 7. You can see the crime scene tape going across the backyard, is that right?
Yes, sir.
On both sides of
It covers up a big section of that driveway there at the end of the carport.
But you can see that you didn't put crime scene tape actually on the mouth of the carport.
No, sir. Or yes, sir, you can see that.
So somebody later came on and did that, that wasn't you?
If it was there later, yes, sir, it was not me.
That's all my questions, John.
Further cross.
Mr. Weber, you did not put up that crime scene tape right away, did you?
No, ma'am. I put it up after I had noticed the blood in the carport.
First thing you did when you got there was you handed Clint Bobo a form to fill out, didn't you?
No, ma'am. I spoke with Clint Bobo first. And then eventually, during our discussions, yes, ma'am, he was handed a form to fill out.
He was handed the form to fill out.
I would object this goes beyond the scope of recalls.
It does, Your Honor, because
She can.
you gave him the form to fill out after Karen Bobo arrived, before Karen Bobo arrived.
I would say that was safe to say, yes, ma'am.
And the crime scene tape was after that.
After what?
You gave him the form to fill out.
At which time, no, it'd be hard pressed to say. It all happened pretty quick within the same moments therein. Once the blood was noticed, there was several things that happened. I realized the severity of what was going on, and things started happening a lot quicker.
But once you realized the severity of what's going on, you still didn't go in the woods.
No, ma'am.
No further questions.
All right, sit down. You're free to go, or you can remain in the courtroom. Charlie, next witness.
Your Honor, can we have a minute to see if we can get the projector working, because our next witness, we're going to use that.
Well, let's just utilize our time. We'll take a morning recess. Follow the rules I gave you at the outset, please. No discussion. The things that are on page 1 of your notebook. Leave your notebooks with us, and we'll take 15 minutes. I said there would be no placards, no T-shirts, no stickers, things like that in support of the victim's family. I instructed the sheriff if they saw any that they were to cover those. There were some yesterday, there were some today. I don't think it's the family. I think it's well-wishers from outside. One car was Chester County, one was Madison County. So just be aware. Please cover anything that would indicate support for anyone. If you don't, the sheriff will cover it. I don't think it will be an issue because this jury is very closely guarded. They're on a bus where they can't see out, and they come directly in the courtroom, but please, if you would, be cautious about that. You folks can be seated until the jury comes in. Thank you. All right, be seated, please. I won't say anything else. Mr. Shaw, birthday yesterday.
Thank you, Judge.
All right.
Appreciate that.
I'm Friday, and we're not going to sing, okay? All right, call your next witness for the state.
The state called Special Agent Lauren James.
She'll be going and coming, okay? Raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir, I did.
Be seated, state your name, and spell first and last.
My name is Lawrence James. Lawrence, Lawrence, James, James.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Agent James.
Good morning.
You also go by Lauren, Loren.
I do.
Where do you work, Mr. James?
I'm employed with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
What do you do at the Bureau of Investigation?
I am a Special Agent Forensic Scientist Supervisor in the Memphis laboratory. I supervise forensic scientists as well as forensic technicians in the evidence receiving unit.
Agent James, how long have you worked with the TBI?
I've been employed with TBI since January of 1999, so a little over 18 and a half years.
Both as a special agent and as a forensic scientist?
That's right.
When did you become a supervisor of the forensic scientist?
June 2013.
Agent James, I want to ask you about your education and how you came to be a forensic.
Let me coach just a minute. Stipulate.
Yes, sir.
All right, stipulate that he's an expert in the field of forensic science. You can go into whatever you want to, but I'm going to give them the opportunity, the board here, if they weren't going to stipulate.
I'll shorten it some.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob. Agent James, tell the jury, please, where you went to college.
I went to Union University,
And you graduated with what degree?
a Bachelor of Science degree in biology,
In what year?
1997.
With honors?
Yes.
And have you worked in the area of science and law enforcement pretty much since that time?
Yeah, there were a couple of years when I was flirting with grad school, but started working at TBI when I was 25.
One of the areas that you're involved in is forensic biology and DNA.
That's right.
Tell the jury how you have experience in those areas.
Yeah, my background is in forensic biology or DNA testing. I trained for approximately a year and a half under the supervision of other qualified DNA analysts at TBI. During that time, I had hands-on experience with approximately 300 cases. I also spent a lot of time in the scientific literature. I had to prepare presentations for my peers to establish my grasp of the material. And at the end of my training, I had to complete a simulated case and defend my work in a simulated court environment. Also, during my training, I completed the TBI's Forensic Scientist School. This was basically, it was a 6 weeks course that gave me an overview of all of the disciplines provided by TBI, specifically within the context of applying those at crime scene processing. And so when I completed that course, I was qualified by TBI to participate in the violent crime response teams for West Tennessee. So I have a slight working knowledge in some of those areas, such as microanalysis or latent print analysis. My specialization is DNA. I still do some DNA testing on a good day if I get lucky and have enough time to do some of that. I'm also required to attend a certain amount of continuing education every year. Generally, that takes the form of attending forensic conferences, or sometimes we'll bring training in-house within TBI and train our analysts within the discipline. Besides that, I've completed training. I've completed the FBI's DNA auditor program, which qualifies me to audit DNA laboratories. So that's kind of an overview of it.
Thank you, James. How many number of serological and DNA examinations have you conducted over your time as a special agent forensic scientist with the TBI?
I stopped counting a long time ago. It's at least thousands, if not tens of thousands of tests.
Have you ever been qualified as an expert in courts in Tennessee in forensic serology and DNA analysis?
Yes, sir, I have.
How many times?
I believe I'm at about 95 times right now.
You know, there's been a stipulation as to his qualifications, but I would tender him as an expert at this time.
He's 96 now, okay?
Thank you, Arnold. Agent James, you talked about the violent crime response team. Tell us some more about that.
So TBI provides, we offer the service of violent crime response team for West Tennessee. Generally, that entails responding to obviously violent crimes. Over 90% of those, I would guess, are either homicides or officer-involved shootings. Essentially, what we do is we go into the scene that has been made secure by the local agencies. We document in various forms, such as video, photography, things of that nature, sketches, and we'll also collect evidence, search the scene for any evidence that we can find, package it, bring it back to the laboratory for testing, things like that. And then after the scene is over, the team leader generates a narrative of what we did and provides that to the investigators.
Agent James, I want to take you back to April 13, 2011. Were you one of the leaders of the violent crime response team on that day?
I was.
And were you dispatched to the Bobo home at 681 Swan Johnson Road in Decatur County, Tennessee?
I was.
Please tell the jury what you did that day.
The laboratory supervisor at the time called me that morning. He told me that to get in contact with the Britt Booth, one of our TBI agents. I called Brent. He told me that there had been a young lady who had been abducted, and that they had already done some searching of the scene, but they wanted specialized forensic assistance. And so I got 3 of my co-workers, and we drove to Decatur County.
What did you do when you arrived at 681 Swan Johnson Road?
I was briefed by Terry Dykes. He gave me an overview of what he knew, of what they believed had happened, and he told me that my team's job was specifically to focus on the garage area. That was where Holly Bobo's car was, and there was believed to be some probably important evidence in that area. He told me that her brother had observed Holly being led towards the woods behind her house with a man in camouflage, and Terry told me that they had already searched that area for footprints, and of course my team, we still went back there and looked for anything. We were looking for blood, we were looking for shoe prints, anything like that, but we were primarily we were concerned with the area of the garage and later did some work inside the house as well.
Were pictures taken of the surroundings, so to speak?
Yes, photography and video were both collected.
I approach you with it.
Yes. Are you going to put him on the projector?
I want him to look at it first. Agent James, I'm going to pass you what's been previously marked as Exhibits 3 through 13 and ask if you can identify those. Recognize those?
I do.
What are those?
These are photographs of the Bobo property.
May I go back? I'll put these on your overhead minute. Agent James, I'll tell you that the jury's already seen these, but I want to run through them if I could. Ask you to identify exhibit, first one's Exhibit 3.
Shoot, we're getting good with these lights.
Once I got the projector turned on.
I'm not, I meant you, I meant in here.
What is that?
That's a photograph of the Bobo home taken from approximately the road leading up their driveway.
Next exhibit, please. What's that?
It's a photograph of the front door, the entrance to the Bobo home.
These are as they look on April 13, 2011.
Yes.
Next, please. What's that, Agent James?
This is a photograph taken from behind the house on roughly the north end, taken from a bird's eye view, looking down at the garage floor. You can see two steps up at the top of the frame that are steps leading between the back door of the residence and the garage. And basically, you can also see the Mustang over in the lower left-hand corner. That's our car. So these were presumed blood drops, later confirmed to be blood.
I want to pass you forward 12 pictures and ask if you can identify them as well. Did I not use this one? I'm sorry. The next one, please. Let me, before you look at that, Agent James, this is another, what is this in Exhibit 20?
This is another photograph taken from the south looking north. The steps leading up to the back door are at the far end of the frame. Obviously, Holly Bobo's vehicle is in the frame. And it basically shows, at least it gives an idea of the proximity of various where blood evidence was located at the scene.
Okay.
You can see. You have a laser pointer?
I do.
So basically, these approximately right here is where the blood drops are, end on the south end of that carport area, and there was blood droplets going. There was a fairly large pool right here, and there was some up on the step as well. And so this photograph just kind of gives an area, a representation of the area where the blood was contained.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll turn to those additional pictures. You recognize those, Agent James?
I do.
What are those generally?
These are photographs that were taken in the carport area.
So I would ask those be admitted into evidence as separately numbered exhibits as we have done with the other pictures. Well, sir.
All right, it'll be 40 through 51.
Your Honor, I did share those with the defense as well. Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Is that correct through 51?
Yes, sir.
I publish, Your Honor. I publish those exhibits.
You may.
Thank you. Agent James, we're now looking at Exhibit 40. Could you tell us what we see here?
This is a photograph of Holly Bobo's vehicle as it was when I arrived on the scene.
And again, you took pictures of a number of areas of the house and the outside and what you believe to be the crime scene.
That's right.
Next, please. Let's turn that. This is Exhibit 41. Agent James, what do we see here?
This is a photograph again of Holly's car parked in the carport, and basically just giving kind of a proximity of how close it was to the walls.
Were you interested in anything about the surface of the carport?
Well, yeah, definitely. We were the carport had a good bit of dust, dirt that had blown in, and so it was potentially a good surface for shoe prints, and that was definitely something that we wanted to be mindful of. And also, too, just the fact that it's close to the walls. You know, when you're working crime scenes, you work with what you've got. You make intuitive decisions. There was also definitely an aspect that as close as that vehicle was to the walls, you know, someone may have brushed up against the vehicle or brushed up against the walls. Maybe, you know, maybe left a handprint or, you know, put their hand on the car. I mean, obviously the fact that blood is there indicates there was probably some sort of struggle. And so all of that kind of factors into our decision making is when we're looking for potential evidence.
Next, please. What do we see here?
This is a photograph of Holly's car taken from the far side of the carport or garage area.
Next, please. This one, sir?
That's a photograph taken from the front driver's side corner of the bumper. It was relevant because there was a good amount of dust on the car. I mean, the car had some dirt on it, and which was good for us because we could see where contact had been made to it. And so there was an area on that corner where the dust had been brushed off, where something had obviously made contact with it. And so hopefully, it could have been anything. It could have been the side of someone's leg, but it could have been a hand as well that knocked that dust off. And so that ended up being, I ended up taking a swabbing of it in the hopes that someone had put their hand down on it or something like that.
Next, please. And James, this is Exhibit 44. What did you see here?
This is a photograph that was taken of a partial shoe print that we located in the garage. It's got a ruler in it because the idea is that before we try to lift shoe prints, we try to photograph, with high quality, high resolution camera for the purposes of comparing if we have any shoes that become submitted later, so that we can make a comparison whether to eliminate or include as a possible source of that shoe print.
The fact that there is a ruler there, trying to get a more specific or precise measurement.
That's right. Yeah, it's the ruler is in there. It is placed in the photograph so that there can be a one-to-one comparison if you actually get a shoe submitted at a later point. I said we earlier. I'm referring. We have a specific unit in our Nashville laboratory that specializes in microanalysis and items such as shoe tracks or tire tracks.
Was this picture taken with the camera on a tripod?
Yes, it is.
Next, please. What do we see here in Exhibit 45?
This is another some sort of print that I thought might have been a shoe. We saw this pattern. There's kind of like a crosshatch pattern, and I saw that pattern a couple of places on the garage floor.
You're showing it.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Say that again, please.
Yeah, so I believed that this was a shoe track that I observed on the garage floor, and this was, I believe we saw this in a couple of locations, and so it was just an attempt to photograph it, hopefully obtain something of for comparison purposes.
Do you have any observations, conclusions here about the condition of the floor?
Well, just that the floor of the garage was quite dirty, for better or worse.
Yes, please. This is Exhibit 40, I can't say, 46? 46. Please tell the jury what you see here.
Again, this is a photograph of a possible shoe track.
Look like pebbles or rocks or little stones on the floor.
Yeah, you can see dirt. I mean, obviously that track appears to be in dust.
Next, please. This is Exhibit 47. Tell the jury what you saw here.
Again, this is a photograph, and I'll be honest with you. Just looking at the photograph, I'm not sure if there was any part of a shoe print there. It definitely looks like something went through that dirt or dust that that disturbed what was there. But ultimately, just looking at the photograph, I couldn't tell you right now if I think that's a shoe track or not. I think it's ultimately just documentation that somebody was moving through there was movement in and out of the garage.
Again, what conclusions do you have about the condition of the floor?
And there were areas where there was a lot of dirt.
Next, please. This may be a little bit similar to what you saw earlier in one of the other exhibits. This is Exhibit 48 with what is that? What are we seeing here?
So again, this is a slightly zoomed in photograph of what I showed you earlier. You can't see the stairs very well anymore, but it's basically a photograph that contains most of the blood evidence that I observed around the vehicle.
That's the front of the car.
Yes, this is the front fender on the left.
Where are the steps?
for the bumper, I mean.
Where are the steps?
The steps are, that concrete is the bottom, and I guess that's the first step right there.
Thank you. Next one. Agent James, this is Exhibit 49, and there's some Post-it notes on there. Are those yours?
I did add those Post-it notes.
They weren't in the original picture.
No.
What was in the original picture?
So this is a photograph taken slightly from above. This is the step right here. First step. Holly Bobo's car is right here. It's the bumper, and this is the wall of the house. And so basically, I was trying to give an overhead shot again of the blood evidence that I observed at the scene.
This is looking down on the other side of the car, still in the front, kind of on top of the step.
Yes. It's a little bit awkward. It's definitely not parallel with the ground, but I was doing the best I could standing on the stair.
And those groupings have some importance with respect to your scientific testing later, or not?
That's right.
I'll come back to those. Let's see the next. Let me have that. Let's see the next one. This is Exhibit 50. Again, those are Post-it notes you put on there.
That's right.
Tell the jury what this view is.
So this is the stair going up to the back porch. The wall would be on this side of the photograph. The vehicle would be on the left side of the photograph. This is a zoomed in area. There was a pool of reddish brown stain that was close, within a couple of inches or so of the stair, a few inches of the stair. And there are also some other blood stains in this view. This one became, it caught my eye, and I can explain that later.
Well, let's go to the next exhibit.
Okay.
Is that the one that caught your eye?
It did.
We're looking at Exhibit 51 here.
That's right.
What is that? That's again your Post-it note.
Yeah, that's ended up being reported out on my report as Exhibit 1E. Basically, it's a blood stain that it appeared different from a lot of the other stains. Many of the blood stains appeared to be drops that were on the floor of the garage. This one looked like a smear. There were also, I don't know how well you can see it. This photograph is pretty, its focus isn't the best, but there was one spot down here, and then this kind of an extended. It's almost like that. The stain together looked like an exclamation point. But the thing that stood out to me was that there were like striations or lines that were observed. They looked as if some sort of pattern had been impressed on that stain. I don't know. I called it ridge detail because I've got that terminology in my head from latent print examination, but ultimately it looks to me like striations from fabric, like denim or I don't know. I think my khaki pants that I wear to work most days tend to have striations in them that are real subtle, but they look like that.
Striations is a big word. Is that kind of like pattern?
Yeah. Just parallel lines.
We're going to come back to the blood in just a moment. I'm going to ask you a question about two more photos. Am I standing approval to approach?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll show you two more pictures and ask you.
Yes.
What are those?
These are photographs that were taken of Holly Bobo's car.
Do you recall if these were taken the next day?
They were taken the next day.
The state would ask that these be admitted into evidence as the next two exhibits.
52 and 53.
publish those, Your Honor?
You may.
This is Exhibit 52, Agent James. That's that same Mustang
It is.
in the garage, the carport the next day?
It is.
It was in the same spot?
Yes.
And what are you doing here? What were you trying to do?
So I'd been called back to the scene around involving a possible, what appeared to be a latent print on the hood. And so this is a photograph of the front passenger side fender near, the area of where the hood kind of curves down onto the side of the vehicle. And yeah, I think the next photograph will explain it.
Next, please.
It'll be kind of self-explanatory. So there were.
Is this the hood?
This is the hood. You can see the wheel well down here, and this line right here is the hood. And there was a smear area right here that you can see. It's not small. It's large. And likewise here, you can see where the dust kind of, like on this side the dust was totally wiped off. On this side it was just disturbed a little bit, and there's a smear in there, and it very much looked to be like a palm size smear. There was even ridge detail that was observable in it.
I guess to say it the easy way, you responded to the scene that day, and the next day took pictures, took samples, and did crime scene investigation. And you also acted as a scientist after that, correct?
That's right.
We'll go back up Exhibit 49. Exhibit 49 has these posted notes that may not be entirely clear, but when the jury gets it in the jury room, they'll see. Tell them, what will they see?
Okay. So, obviously blood evidence can be a valuable tool in terms of, examining crime scenes and examining evidence. There was a good amount of blood here at this scene. My approach generally, I'm speaking for myself and most of the people that I work with, we don't process every blood drop we see. We don't swab them individually. I might have had 50 or 60 blood drops here. My approach, number one, I'll just give you my mindset. The importance or the significance of blood evidence is to establish who was at a crime scene, who was bleeding at a crime scene. Obviously, if you've got a victim of a violent crime, a reasonable assumption is your victim is very possibly going to be bleeding at the scene. That's the case in the vast majority of the crime scenes I respond to. At the same time, my goal is to seek to put someone else, a possible perpetrator, at a scene using DNA evidence. And so my approach here was to group these blood droplets, the blood stains, into manageable group sizes that would allow me to cover most of what is represented here, to test most of it, and at the same time not spend the next 6 months analyzing blood drops on the garage floor. So what I did was group these into 5 different areas and collect a representative sampling of blood droplets from those areas. I told you earlier about the shape that looked like an exclamation point. It looked like something had been pressed into it and left the striations or the pattern in it. I sampled that one separately just because I thought it was interesting. My feeling was either somebody knelt down onto a blood drop and smeared it a little bit, or it was already on somebody's clothing and they knelt down and transferred it onto the ground either way, it was a different stain than most of the drops that I observed.
Now, which one is that?
So you can't see it very well in this photograph, but it's roughly in this area right. Actually, I can't see it. It's right there.
Is that 1E?
That's it. That's 1E. Yeah. I called it swab number 5 in my original notes, and when it got submitted to the laboratory, it became Exhibit E. And I believe my report says area with ridge detail. It's a swab from the floor of the garage. It says area of ridge detail. There was another area. The first stain that I collected was roughly this area right here that encompassed this large pool right here. I mean, that was a fist size approximately blood stain. So not just a couple of drops.
That's
but
1A?
That's 1A, and I called it a large stain on my report for just to clarify. There was another grouping. The second swabbing that I took was a grouping of what appeared to be blood drops that were over close to the wall. Again, thinking maybe if two people are scuffling in this area, maybe if both of them are bleeding or whatever, maybe one person's blood might be over here versus right here. And so I took a sample right here that became Exhibit 1B in my report. It's just swabs from floor of garage near wall. The third grouping was this far. This is the grouping that's the furthest south. It roughly lines up with about the middle of the hood. I mean, that license plate on the front of her vehicle is a pretty good estimate of where those fell in the scheme of that area. And so I called that swabbing ended up being Exhibit 1C, swab from floor of garage, south end of the pattern. And then the fourth stain, there was a grouping that was kind of in this middle area, and you can't see it very well. I was kind of disappointed how the photographs came out, but there was a stain up here on the step as well, a good sized stain, and so I swabbed that area along with those. So that was my fourth grouping, and I called that swab from floor of garage stairs.
So let me see if I can summarize. This area is the area that had the placard with number 1 on it.
Right.
And you took 5 different swabs, 1A, B, C, D, and E.
That's right.
Tell the jury what it means to be taking a swab.
Well, we use cotton swabs. They're glorified Q-tips on a wooden stick. Swab on one end. Just put some sterilized water on it to wet it, and then swab the surface of the area. In this case, blood droplets.
Pass you a. Let me turn the lights back on.
Okay.
Pass you a paper bag and ask if you can identify this. Need some scissors?
You want me to open them? Yeah, that'd be great. I do recognize the package.
What is it?
This bag contains the swab samples that I collected from the floor of the garage.
Those are the samples you collected and then ultimately tested
That's right.
in the same condition that you took them in.
That's right.
Are those samples?
Yes, they are in here.
That's those five.
Yes.
State would ask that the bag and its contents be marked and admitted into evidence as the next exhibit.
Exhibit 54.
Agent James, let me go ahead and get that marked, and then we'll proceed. Your Honor, may Agent James just hold these up and pose them to the jury. Told you to keep gloves on. Just pull them out and show them to the jury.
It'll be all right. So basically, what I did was I've broken the sticks off of them, but every one of these contains a pair of swabs, and some of them still have a good bit of sample left, and some of them are, I believe they're mostly consumed on one of them or something like that. But basically, every one of these little plastic petri dishes contains a pair of swabs, and most of them have some reddish brown stain on them.
So you've been to the house, you've taken pictures, you've obtained these swabs, and you've obtained the panties which are exhibit 26, correct?
That's right.
What was the purpose for getting all that?
So, the panties specifically, or the other things, or?
Well, all of them. Let me ask you this. What were you ultimately trying to get to?
Well, ultimately, like I said earlier, we were wanting to hopefully establish a link with a suspect, whether through shoe prints or through blood drops, grazing against the bumper of a car, things of that nature.
You're ultimately going to do a DNA analysis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell the jury what DNA is.
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a chemical that's present in most cells in our body. Basically, it's a chemical blueprint for everything that goes on in our body, from how we process the food we eat to how our body transmits nervous signals. There's also a component, DNA is inherited from our parents. We get half from our mother, half from our father, and so even physical characteristics. The fact that we look like our siblings or we look like our parents, it's attributable to DNA. It determines those characteristics as well.
Do individuals have different DNA?
Yes, much like fingerprints, DNA is unique to each individual, with the exception of identical twins. So for my testing purposes, identical twins would not be distinguishable by DNA testing, but besides that, as far as we know, we've never seen any two individuals have the same DNA profile.
How do you go about your DNA testing? What do you do first? Or you got these samples, what did you do first to start down this path?
The first thing that I do is called serology. Serology is just the identification of body fluids. Most of the samples that come into our laboratory undergo some degree of determination of, is there a body fluid here that might be relevant. And so in this particular case, I did testing to determine that yes, indeed, these stains that I've swabbed off of the floor of the garage, they are blood.
So let me interrupt. You thought it was blood.
Sure.
But you did a test to determine that.
That's right.
And that test generally came back with blood.
That's right.
Okay?
Once I determine that a stain is blood, for example, I'll proceed with DNA testing at that point. DNA testing it's a 4-step process. The first step involves extracting DNA out of everything else that's on. I mean, in this particular case, I showed you that I've got cotton swabs. So what I would do is take a cutting from some of that stain and run it through a process where the DNA is removed from all the substrate or the cotton swab, as well as the other biological debris that's present in that stain. I run a second step that gives me an idea of how much DNA is present in that sample that I extracted. The third step is called amplification. Basically, it focuses or specifically isolates. In 2011, we were looking at 13 specific areas on DNA. When I say that, I guess a lot of people think that maybe DNA analysis consists of sequencing or something like that. We don't do. The testing that we do is we're basically looking at about 12 pages out of War and Peace novel. I mean, we're looking at a very small amount of the DNA, but there are 13 specific areas that are known to be highly variable in the human population. And once I've done amplification on the sample, in other words, I've made lots of copies of what I've already got, the last step is just putting it on a genetic analyzer that separates out DNA fragments by size and then attributes a DNA type to those DNA fragments. Once I have a profile that I've obtained from an item, then I'm able to compare it back to DNA profiles that I've generated from reference samples from individuals in question.
We talked about a few pages of War and Peace. Let me see if I can understand that. If you're looking at DNA attributes, so to speak, there's many of them, correct?
That's right.
But at the time, we're looking at 13 specific ones that can distinguish different people. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that what you did here?
Yes.
Is that what's typically done?
Yeah, we've since 2011 we've gone from 13 to 15, and now I believe it's 24 areas that we're looking at. But that was the standard in the forensic community at the time, and still is pretty representative of what's done.
And that's to be able to see if a profile matches someone or doesn't match someone, correct?
That's right.
That can be a suspect or a victim, could it not?
That's right. It may also be a mixture, so we may have multiple people present in a profile.
TBI has protocols for this.
Yes.
Are those followed in this instance?
Yes.
I'll pass forward to you, document and execute. Recognize it.
This is a copy of the report I generated.
Your Honor, statement asks this to be admitted into evidence as the next number of exhibit.
I see a copy of that, just so I know.
Yes. This is the report you prepared.
Yes, sir.
Has the application number on it, the same as on the swap you took earlier.
Yes.
So you have these 5 swabs. And you have this this pair of underwear. I want to switch for a second and talk about the underwear. What did you do with the underwear?
The underwear was collected in lieu of, because I didn't have a reference standard from Bobo. Generally,
Let me interrupt. What's a reference standard?
Yeah, reference sample, a reference standard is a sample that's collected from a person of interest in a case. And generally, that's done by a cheek swab. quick, easy, but that's assuming you've got the person of interest available to collect a sample from.
So if I was a person of interest, what would you do to get a reference sample from them?
Well, law enforcement would, we actually provide kits for, they're called buccal swab kits, and it's just a pair of swabs, and they would ask you to open your mouth, and they would swab the inside of your cheek, and then package that up and send it to me.
It's one of those fancy Q-tip type things?
Yes.
That's a reference sample.
Yes.
Sample.
Historically, they've also collected blood for that, but the cheek swabs are just less invasive and don't require a nurse, and so that's where most of law enforcement has transitioned at this point.
At this point, you didn't have any reference.
That's right.
Or samples.
Yeah, both. I use them interchangeably. Standard is kind of the word that implies this is an item of evidence that's specifically collected for generating a profile as a reference.
So you didn't have that here, but you did have Holly's underwear.
That's right, yeah. So obviously Holly was missing. We didn't know. Ultimately, I had to find something personal of hers that would generate, that I could obtain a profile from that would reasonably attribute to her. I looked at toothbrushes, and from what I remember, there were several toothbrushes in there. I believe it was a shared bathroom, and the investigator was out. Ultimately, she was the only young lady living in the house as far as and using that bathroom. And so just from many years of experience with underwear, I expected to be able to get a profile out of it, and I did.
What did you do to get that profile of Agent James?
I just took a cutting of the lining and ran it through the same DNA process that I did with the swabs.
That same four-step process?
That's right.
And after you took the cutting, you actually cut a piece of fabric out
Yes.
and then ran your tests on it.
Yes.
You did produce a profile.
It did.
Now, with respect to the blood, there were 5 different samples, and each of those tested, they were in fact blood, correct?
That's right.
Let's talk about 1A. We've got back up on the screen. We don't have to darken the lights, but 1A is there at the bottom left.
That's right.
Okay. Tell us what you did with respect to that. Did you run that through the process, the DNA process too?
Yeah, I generated a DNA profile from that sample.
And what was your conclusion to a reasonable degree of medical scientific certainty?
The profile that I obtained was partial. In other words, there was indication that there was, and I'll just go on and tell you what my suspicion is, but dirt is known to be, and it is known to be something that interferes with the DNA, specifically the amplification process. And so it became an issue on several of these samples. But ultimately I got a partial profile, and that profile matched the profile that I obtained from the Bobo, the underwear that I assumed to be Holly Bobo's.
And her mother identified, well, you don't know that. That's Exhibit 26 that you looked at earlier.
Okay.
So you have a profile, a partial profile, correct?
That's right.
You got a partial profile off 1A. Correct?
That's right.
It's fair to say just because you see what you think is blood, but test presumptively to be blood, you don't necessarily get a complete DNA profile from it in certain instances, correct?
Sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. Like it's my feeling and opinion that the dirt interfered on this one.
You did get a profile from this underwear,
Yes.
and that was based on using these 13 specific markers on DNA.
That's right.
All right, so we talked about 1A. 1B, which is, point that out to the jury again.
1B is the area that's up close to the wall up here.
What was your result of the testing on 1B?
So the profile that I've got there, I actually ran that sample 3 times. The first time, I got data that was below my reporting limit.
And I tell the jury what that means, data below your reporting limit.
Yeah, so the DNA profiles that I obtained, there's kind of like, we set a point. This is hard to explain, but I would, if I could make an analogy, I would liken it to radio signal for those of us who use radio, where if you've got a little bit of signal, sometimes you can, if you're rolling through the stations, you'll hear some stuff, and you can pick up enough to know that it's a talk show or it's music or this or that, but you can't really hear lyrics. That's kind of, there's a range where my instrumentation is similar to where we acknowledge, yeah, that is human genetic data that's being generated, but when you start getting down in these low levels of sample, you get interference, you get data that drops out. Ultimately, what I would say is that data is, we've decided through our own internal studies that below a certain point, that data is questionable. It starts to get gray. It's a gray area where we're hesitant to use it. We certainly won't use it for inclusions. We might use it to exclude people if that's the case. But this sample fell in that range where it was just low level. Again, my suspicion is the dirt was interfering. And ultimately I ran it 3 times. 2 of the times I got data below the point where my laboratory allows me to interpret it, and one of the 3 times my DNA ended up in it, which I think has happened twice in 18 years. So
Sneeze or tear or something?
I don't know. There was a period we wear masks these days because we've learned the hard way that, yeah, if you talk over something, you're liable to show up on a piece of evidence or on an evidence profile. But my DNA showed up on one of those 3 examinations.
Let's go to 1C. You did the same sort of tests on it?
That's right, same test.
What were your results to degree of scientific certainty?
The profile that I've got was a complete profile, and it matched the profile that I got from Holly Bobo's underwear.
You were able to get a complete profile that matched all those important markers.
Yes.
They gave you a result on all those markers.
Right.
And it matched the profile that you obtained from Holly's underwear.
Yes.
Can you use the laser and show us which that was? It's D.
1C.
C.
C was the grouping that's on the far south end.
What about 1D? Same sort of analysis?
Yes. Yes, 1D is the area on the step and immediately below it, kind of in the middle between the wall grouping and this large pool grouping.
What was your conclusion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Again, I got a partial profile from that area, and it matched the profile from Holly Bobo's underwear.
And lastly, 1E, one that had those striations, you call them.
That's right, the one that kind of resembled an exclamation point that was right in the center, roughly. But yeah, I wasn't able to generate a DNA profile that met my reporting limit.
And again, that's because of, what do you think?
Again, just, and I will say there wasn't as much sample on. I mean, it wasn't like droplets, like some of the other 4 samples. I still would expect to get a DNA profile from it, and I believe it's my opinion that the dirt played a factor in that.
Dust and those stones and other things we saw on the carport floor.
Yes.
Have you experienced that? Have you experienced that during your work at TBI and other cases?
Yeah, it's not uncommon. I mean, there are several things that we know of that we encounter on a regular basis. Leather gives us problems. Blue jean dye, the blue dye in denim gives us problems. Ultimately, and I guess one of the frustrating things is that, I mean, we've developed tools to cope with these issues that arise since then, but that's where I was in 2011, and so I didn't go back and retest.
So with respect to 1C, you said the DNA profile matched the profile from the underwear.
That's right.
What is the probability of an unrelated individual having the same DNA?
Which exhibit are we on again?
1C.
1C. So the probability of obtaining that profile, if I were to go out and randomly select out of the population, I would expect to find that profile approximately once in 812 trillion, 300 billion individuals from the Caucasian population. I would expect to find that profile approximately once in 1 quintillion, 260 quadrillion individuals in the African American population. In the Southeastern Hispanic population, I would expect to find it approximately once in 3 quadrillion, 595 trillion individuals. And in the Southwest Hispanic population, I would expect to find that profile approximately once in 62 quadrillion, 660 trillion individuals. The point.
Zero.
Yeah, it is a lot.
It exceeds the world population, does it not?
Yeah, that's how we report it, just to summarize it concisely.
Just a moment, John.
You may. Why don't you kill that light, unless you're going to use it. All right. All right, cross-examination.
I'd like to pass that bag up to you.
Has it previously been marked or not?
It has not previously been marked, so you can
You
go
want to
ahead and
identify it?
identify it.
You need gloves?
I think I'm okay. Do we have some available? Are you going to want me to cut into it?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so this bag, let's see, it's, I know it is Exhibit 5. So I'll
Okay.
pass it up to you.
But that's not our exhibit.
It's not our exhibit number, it's
Okay.
just the number on.
I'm trying to keep our records straight.
Right, I think that's the lab number, so I'm going to pass to you. Now, I'll tell you what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a report. Do you have all your reports with you?
I hope so. I'm not, I believe so.
There's so many reports.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
At one, it's a microanalysis report, but it's dated 5/25/11. It's not a report you did, but this report's telling me, I believe you collected this bag.
Okay.
Is that your writing on there?
It is my writing.
Okay, because I couldn't identify the signature. It was a little scratchy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did we have scissors earlier?
I have them.
Okay.
Can you go ahead and open that bag for me? Give me a hint. I think there's a pair of shoes in there.
I believe there may be.
There might be other clothing, but I was interested in the shoes.
Okay.
Okay, and can you pull out the two shoes in there for me? They're going to be D and E.
All right, there's E. Here's D.
Okay. Now, can you tell me where you collected these items from?
I'm gonna have to look at my notes.
These clothes were collected from Clint Bobo, weren't they?
They were collected out of his room.
Okay. And weren't they the clothes that he was wearing that morning?
I'm not sure if I was privy to that information or not. We just found clothing in his room, and I don't remember.
Clearly, you didn't take all the clothing in his room.
Definitely not.
I mean, these, as far as you remember, the only clothes that were collected that day.
Right.
Okay. And you would have did clothes that would have been relevant to the investigation,
Sure.
not just any clothes that were laying around.
Right. I remember looking through his clothing for blood-stained items.
Okay.
That's one of the waiters were collected.
Sure. In case somebody's changed before you got there and they had blood on their clothes.
Right.
And these shoes, can you go ahead and open the two shoes? They're a left and a right cross, weren't they?
I believe so. Actually, there are two pairs. So I've got, this is Exhibit 5E, and these are Crocs.
Okay.
They don't look like it on the top, but they're Crocs.
Okay. The 5E was the one that I was interested in anyway.
Okay.
And tell me, can you look at them again? Tell me what size do they say they are? The Crocs have a size on them.
9.
9? Okay. It's not necessary we open that then.
Okay.
So Your Honor, at this time I'd ask that we put these into evidence. Since they're all packaged in one bag, I don't know if we need to put the whole thing in. Just put the whole bag in. Okay.
Okay. The entire bag and contents will be moved into evidence exhibit 56.
Mr. James, did you do any of the crime scene investigation when the state of Tennessee searched Terry Britt's home?
I did.
Okay, and you're familiar with that also, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you have your reports with you from that search?
I do.
Okay. So, what's the first date on one of those reports?
I'm not sure if I'm, okay, because I'm going to get confused.
I want to go by the first date. What's the first date you pick up? What's that?
The first,
Reports from the same day?
I'm a little bit lost because we weren't generating reports on crime scene responses we weren't issuing violent crime response team reports in 2011 or 2012. And so
Okay.
I may have done work in the laboratory on stuff that was collected, and it's going to be in a different location from my actual violent crime response notes.
Okay. So, are you saying you didn't bring it with you, or?
I think I've got it, but I've got a lot of paperwork that I'm going to need some direction.
Me too. Okay. Well, we'll just start with the search of Terry Britt's house. You remember that this is a home that's owned by Janet and Terry Britt? Yes?
Okay, I remember the property.
Okay. And they're a husband and wife. Do you
Okay.
And they live there and close to the Bobo residence. Do you remember that part?
Well, no, because I got there from an airport. I drove from an airport to the residence, and I
Okay.
couldn't get there again. But
Okay. So, when you searched their home, some of the things that you searched there were cars. Do you remember that you searched, there were 5 cars there?
what I remember is that we had numerous teams and numerous agencies involved in that, and my entire day was spent in one house.
Okay,
I don't believe I ever looked at vehicles.
vehicles, okay. Which part then did you participate in?
The residence.
Okay, and there were multiple buildings there. Do you remember that there were multiple buildings and then a big,
I believe there was like a semi-trailer or a
Yes,
storage
semi-trailer.
container or some, a shipping container may have been out there.
there was a semi-truck trailer that was a refrigerator trailer, had very thick walls. Do you remember that part?
Yes, and I didn't go into it.
Okay. And then there was like a mobile home trailer that had a lot of items stored in it. Did you go in there?
This is not the residence.
Not the residence, no.
I don't believe I may have stepped in there, but I really don't remember much about it.
So you did go in the residence?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember finding some cell phones that were hidden in the residence, in the bathroom under some personal hygiene products?
I'm sorry. I'm refreshing off my notes.
It's no problem. Take your time.
I have in my notes that there were 3 cell phones that were collected, but they weren't collected by forensic personnel,
Okay.
or at least when I say forensic personnel, I mean my team, my coworkers.
And
There was one TBI person, I believe from Nashville, and there was an FBI employee who was involved in those.
there were some blonde hairs collected there. Were those collected by the forensic team?
I don't remember. I do have in my notes that there was a possible hair collected.
Okay, and where, in your notes, where was that particular hair collected from? Can I ask you right now, what is it that you're looking at?
I'm reading my narrative that contains an overview of.
I guess, Your Honor, at this time I'd asked for Jinx material. I know I'd asked yesterday and understood I had everything, but I don't believe I have that narrative he's looking at. I'd like to have copies of his notes and narrative, which may help me narrow my questions.
It's the state's understanding everything's been turned over on multiple occasions. In fact, at the end of June, there was a whole nother run. So the TBI lab information that was brought to Nashville, copied and made available to the parents.
And that is what I have, Your Honor, and I don't believe I have a narrative from the Britt house. I know I would have read it and studied it and had it right here.
I think there's absolutely
I can help.
no objection on the part of the state for her to look at whatever she wants to. We stand by the fact that we've turned over everything we've provided.
Okay, well,
She can look at it. He's
Let's
got
hand it to the bailiff to hand it to her, and you can examine it. If you haven't been able to find this, we'll run copies.
If it helps, that narrative is actually an extension of the original crime response from April 13th, 2011.
Okay.
So if you've got the narrative for my original response on April 13th, then the Britt portion of it starts on page 5.
I thought you said that you didn't used to do narratives from 2011 from a crime.
We did.
response.
We wrote narratives and we turned them over to the investigators, but about a year and a half or 2 years ago, we actually started issuing reports that are accessible in our LIMS system. So they actually, it's actually in a report. It's not just a Word document as it used to be, essentially.
Okay. Let me find what I have here. Okay, what I have that I thought was from you was simply, it's Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and then it's a brief crime scene description. It has a lot of drawings in here, and measurements of the home, and some notes from that day, like what time you arrived, what time you went into particular rooms, but I don't see anything at all in here from the Britt home. And I don't see any typed narrative in what I have. I have handwritten notes. Because it looks like you were there the next day also. And this is at the Bobo home.
That's right.
So if I could just see those papers then, and maybe that'll help me. So it says that you found one possible blonde hair in the portion that you searched, but you aren't the person that tested that blonde hair, are you?
Definitely not. I did find, I've got mention of it. Ultimately, what I have in my notes is that one of our agents, Mike Frizzell, was designated as an evidence custodian for that day in relation to that specific search warrant. And so I've got that all evidence was turned over to him. So I don't even have an evidence log from that day,
Okay.
which we would normally complete as part of VCRT responses. And so,
So he's the one that might have that evidence log.
And
He's
it's-
the one that would have done it.
I think so.
Okay.
And what I would expect is that the bag would probably contain more information on where it was collected.
That would contain what?
More information on where it was collected.
Okay.
It's
very
just kind of a
good. And
typical.
do you remember collecting a photocopy of a yearbook with a young woman's picture on it, and somebody had highlighted her name and then rewritten in the highlighter her name out to the side?
That does ring a bell.
I'll pass this back to you and it might help.
You have a 10-minute witness.
I don't think our witness, I don't know how tall he is, but I don't think he'll be.
I said 10 minutes. I didn't say a short witness.
I didn't want to tell you short, but I think he'll be relatively quick.
All right, let's call the next one.
Warren Rainey.
Raise your right hand. Solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
So help me God.
Be seated, state your name, and spell first and last name for the court reporter, please.
Warren Rainey, W-A-R-R-E-N-R-A-I-N-E-Y.
And you just will tell them, I stole your ink pen 25, 30 years ago, but I did give it back, right?
No, sir, that is incorrect. He stole my ink pen and I did not get it back, but he bought me one.
Okay, okay.
That's the truth.
Some people never forget, I'll tell you. That goes back many, many, many moons ago.
A long time.
Where you work?
Tennessee Highway Patrol,
How long you been doing that?
31 years.
31 years. What area of Tennessee do you live in?
I live in Carroll County in Huntington.
I want to ask you about April of 2011. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Did you take part at all in the search and investigation to try to find Holly Bobo?
For about 18 months.
Just you or other members of the Highway Patrol?
In the beginning, it was anywhere from 12 to 15 members. And in the end, it was just a couple of us.
When did y'all first get started then?
The very day.
The day it happened?
Yes, sir.
Y'all out scrambling and running?
Yes.
After that, still scrambling and running?
Every day.
At some point, did you have occasion to focus on one Zach Adams?
Yes. 2 occasions.
Did you have an occasion to visit his home?
Twice.
What brought you to his home?
very soon after Holly was taken, I began asking people for anyone who lived north of Parsons, who'd been in trouble, drug user, sex offender, which I could look that up on the internet, which I did. And I would ask anyone, and one of the names that came up was Zach
Your
Adams.
Honor, I object to the hearsay coming in, even though he's not saying.
This is not being offered for the truth, it's to show why he did what he did,
I
okay?
think it's being
And once again, the jury won't consider it in any way for the truth, it's just explain the officer's actions.
Why in the work of Parsons?
I had mapped where Holly's cell phone had went, what direction. I knew where the evidence was collected. And when I drove those routes from their house on Swan Johnson to get to this area on Yellow Springs Road,
And where's Yellow Springs Road?
it runs right beside the interstate, right beside I-40.
Is that in Holiday, Tennessee?
Yes.
Okay. You drove those routes?
And went to the last area in that area where a credit card receipt that she had signed was found in a man's yard. So in my mind, this someone knew exactly where they were going. They knew these roads because I've worked in and out of this area for 25 years. I don't know that I could drive through there today without having them out.
You're looking out for a tourist or somebody who knew these roads.
They had to know it.
Someone in the area of Yellow Springs and Holiday,
Yes, sir.
an area that you have been in years and years and years.
Yes.
So what men did you go to? What men near Holiday did you go to?
Sometime around the second Saturday, I had been speaking with FBI and the TBI, and I decided that I was going to go to Zach's house, see if I could find him at home.
And you said second Saturday after what?
Second Saturday after the abduction.
Which was on Wednesday.
Yes.
So this would be about a week and a half after the abduction. Is that
Yes.
correct?
To the best of my memory, it was.
So your knowledge was Zach Adams a local?
Yes. My troopers knew of him well.
To your knowledge, does Zach Adams live near Yellow Springs Road?
Not very far.
North of Parsons?
Yes.
Near Holiday, Tennessee?
Yes.
Well, why'd you go to talk to him?
His name kept coming up.
What was your purpose in talking to him?
Matter of fact, just to knock on his door and see if he knew anything about this.
So is that what you did?
Yes.
Tell us what happened.
Knocked on his door, took a trooper with me. It was fairly early in the morning, not real early. The door opened up, and Zach came to the door, opened it up. He looked like he had just woke up, just got out of bed, had on a pair of blue jeans, some kind of shoes, no shirt. Asked him to step outside, asked him what his full name was. He said, Zachary Rye Adams, what's this about? And I said, well, just let me ask you a few questions. And I said, do you own a cell phone? He said he did. And I said, well, give me the phone number so I can put it on here. And he said, no, my girlfriend's already gave that to him. And I said, what, gave what to who? He said, gave my number to other agencies. And I said, well, just give me your number so that I can have it in case I want to talk to you. And what's your address? And he said, wait a minute, I need to get a shirt. So he starts into the house to get a shirt. Well, I'll go in right behind him. We take about 3-4 steps, and he stops and turns around, and he says, what are you doing? And I said, well, we're coming in here to get a shirt. I'm not going to let you walk in here by yourself. And there was a shirt laying on a pool table, I believe it was, and he got it out, and he wanted me out of the house. So we went outside and he put it on. And he kept telling me that he didn't have anything to do with it, that his girlfriend had turned him in, and I could tell he was just visibly shaking. He was scared.
Why did you come to the conclusion that he was scared?
No, he was shaking.
Shaking so much that you noticed it?
Oh, yes.
A lot or a little bit?
A lot.
How long did that meeting last?
It was pretty short. I went over to talk to his grandfather because I knew from looking on the internet, but I wanted to know where their property line was in the back of the house. His grandfather, very nice man, was very helpful, and then we left.
Okay. And did you leave and just forget about it?
Nope.
Tell me what you left and did.
When I drove down to the end of the driveway, I was doing more driving looking out my left rearview mirror than I was looking where I was going. They live on a road. Their driveway is very long. We was left from the grandfather's house, which is next door, and I saw Zach in my mirror and even keyed the radio up and told the trooper behind me, look out your mirror. Zach ran, I'm not talking, a little jog, a little sprint, wide open back to his house.
Ran wide open. What did you think about that?
Why does he need to get back to that house? Something's up.
You've been shaking? Is that right?
Yeah.
And now run.
Yes, sir.
So what did you do next?
I went and hid up the road.
You hid up the road.
I went up the road by the CB shop and hid. I wanted to watch. Told a trooper to go back down 641 toward Parsons and stop somewhere. I called, I'm going to say a command post, someone there, told them, you need to get someone up here because I'm very suspicious about Zach Adams.
Okay.
There's something here. And about that time, a pickup truck pulled out and headed toward Parsons.
Pulled out of where?
Out of their driveway.
Who was in that pickup truck?
Dylan.
Dylan Adams?
Yes, sir. I did not know that at the time, but he left out there so reckless, well, I had probable cause to stop him. So we had a trooper stop him before he got to Parsons.
So he took out driving fast out of that place?
Oh, yes. And took back roads to get to Parsons.
And he was stopped later?
Yes.
All right. And what'd you do?
Just continue to watch the house, and at some point in this, I'm not sure it was that afternoon, but I described to the agents, and they could be TBI agents and FBI, but anyway, they came and talked to him. Someone did. I know Sheriff White was one of them, and someone in a suit, from what I could see in my binoculars, was with him.
So you're literally, you're head out with binoculars watching this place?
Oh, yes. So I assembled either that afternoon or the next morning, and I've been told it's the next morning. 3 K9 teams.
All right, he can't testify to what he's been told.
If I asked you for an exact date when what you're about to tell us happened, well, what would you tell us?
I have absolutely no idea. I took reports, wrote reports, and I don't know what happened to him.
Was it close in time to when you had encountered him and he was nervous and he was running and
Yes.
Dylan took off driving?
Yes.
Within a day or 2 or 3 or weeks? Which one?
A day.
Okay, so within a day?
Yes.
Either that day or the next day?
Yes. I think it was the next day.
Okay. What happened the next day?
I assembled a search team at 3 K9 units with cadaver dogs and sent them, showed them where the property line was, and I sent them all behind the house. There's hundreds of acres of county property back there and told them to go search.
And how about you? What did you do?
I think I went back around while they were searching I know I did, to the front of the house where I'd been parked.
In front of whose house?
Zach's just down the road.
Okay. Did you, this next time when we got dogs and searchers in the woods behind, did you encounter Zach at all
No,
at this time?
no, I did not.
Okay. We're going to hear from one of the searchers. So
Yes.
I'm not asking you to, you can't testify to things you didn't, do.
Right.
Okay. As a result of any of the searching, the information that was conveyed to you, did you take any other step? What did you do next?
I went back. I had to go back to the house, to his house.
Back to Zach's house?
Yes.
All right. What did you do at Zach's house the second time?
Told Zach and his grandfather that a searcher saw something behind the house.
Let's just leave.
I'm going to object to the fact that he's talking about what he's learned from another person.
Now, he can say what he said to Zach.
Well, not if he's saying somebody told me and then he starts to say what somebody
Then
told
the
him.
jury will not consider that for the truth.
But it is for the truth. He's telling Zach something.
Well, he can give Zach's response then.
Zach's response?
I asked-
What you told him?
I asked Zach and Dick Adams for permission to look at an area behind Zach's house.
On the way to that area, did you notice anything that you thought was odd?
Absolutely.
What did you notice?
I went around the north side of the house, headed in the direction where this area was that I needed to look at, and I noticed a mattress leaning up against the house on the northeast corner.
Okay, why did you find that odd?
Looked like a decent mattress to me. I could describe it. I just don't know why. If you would why you would lean a mattress upside the house like that and leave it?
So it didn't look like an old mattress.
No.
It looked like a decent one.
Yes.
Leaned up against the house that Zach lived in.
Yes.
Did you ask him about it?
No, I didn't.
What did you do next?
I walked down the hill behind his house, turned the corner, and this is right on the edge of the county property. I noticed that someone had cut a tree up high and had felled it, and it was over a dirt area about half the size of that table. I'm going to say 6 foot by 8 foot spot that was bare dirt with no grass.
Had somebody been afraid or something that this was a grave or something?
Yes.
But did you check it out?
Oh, yes.
Did you dig?
Yes.
John, I'm going to object to that leading question about the grave.
Well, to establish that it wasn't. I mean, I'm attempting to be fair.
He can continue.
You
Yes.
established that it was not,
Yes, I needed a shovel, and I asked Zach, and he went and got me one.
and you dug.
Yes. I
There
knew
was
that
no
it was
grave.
no grave. It was roots on top of the ground. There was no way.
You saw a mattress, you dug, it's not a grave. So do you just leave and forget about it?
I spoke with him and his grandfather briefly, then I left and called a TBI agent.
Did you tell them what you saw?
Absolutely.
Did you still have people in the woods?
Yes. All but one had to come out.
You still have one person in the woods?
No. I
And
had
everybody in the
6, 8,
woods.
10 in the woods. One had to come out.
Okay. Still watching?
Yes. That's all the questions.
We'll take lunch as soon as we finish cross-examination.
So, Mr. Rainey, did you know Mr. Adams before Holly Bobo disappeared?
No.
So you basically went around town asking who's a bad guy,
Yes.
okay? And somebody, based on what they said, you decided you were going to focus on Zach Adams.
Yes, because his name had come up several times.
Okay. So, were you aware that he was involved in methamphetamine?
I'd been told that.
Okay. So you show up to his house on, what day of the week was it?
I do honestly believe it was a Saturday morning.
Saturday morning, you show up at his house, and this person who's involved in meth, looks like he's been asleep that morning, right?
No, most definitely.
And I see today you're wearing a highway, is that a highway patrol, Tennessee Highway Patrol uniform?
One of them, yes.
And when you showed up at his house, would you have had a Tennessee Highway Patrol uniform on?
Yes, as a utility.
What do you mean as a utility?
It's a lot cheaper uniform than this one because we've been doing a lot of searching and it tears them up.
Okay, so you had your
VDUs.
outdoor uniform on,
Yes.
maybe is what you'd call it. Okay. But it still would have clearly indicated you were law enforcement.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And you knock on his door, cold call,
Yes.
okay? He opens the door, he looks to you like he's sleepy. And he doesn't have his shirt on, just has on some pants.
Correct.
And you say, first thing you notice about him is he's looking nervous.
Oh, yes, his eyes came well. He was not asleep anymore.
He opens the door and hears the police standing there, and his eyes are big, you said.
Yes.
Okay. And you said at some point as he's talking to you, he begins to shake.
Immediately.
Immediately. Police are at his door, and he opens the door. You've got on a uniform. Do you have a gun when you are in your uniform?
All the time.
So you have a gun strapped to your waist,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes,
he
ma'am.
begins to shake.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so next thing you're asking him for is, and you don't have notes of your activity that day with you, do you?
I turned them in.
Okay. So the next thing that you ask him is you say, well, you want his telephone number.
I think something to that effect, his full name, his address, his cell phone number.
And he begins to get nervous when you ask for his telephone number. Is that right?
Now, he was nervous when he opened the door.
He begins to object to giving you his telephone number.
Yes, he did.
And he says that it's already been provided to law enforcement.
He said his girlfriend had turned it in.
Okay. Now, when you were there that day, had you been specifically told to go talk to Zach Adams?
Absolutely not.
So this is kind of what you're doing as a searcher, an assistant. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I mean, you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart because you're wanting to help find this missing person. Is that right?
I'd have done anything to found her.
Okay. And so you say you want his cell phone number.
Mm-hmm.
And he does not provide it to you at that point. Is that right?
Not at the beginning.
Okay. And he eventually provides it to you?
Yes.
Okay. He says, well, wait a minute, I need to go get a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so he turns around and he starts to walk back to get a shirt on.
Right. Correct.
And you, without invitation, step into his house.
Absolutely.
And you recognize you have absolutely no legal right to be in his house.
I wasn't going to go all the way through his house, but I was not going to let a man that I did not know step in a house and obtain a firearm and shoot me.
Okay, but that's a position you've put yourself in.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so you took it upon yourself to step on into his house.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if somebody wearing a gun showed up at your house and began to walk into your house, you personally might, let's say they're not wearing a uniform, they just are standing there with a gun on, you might find it offensive for someone with a gun on to step into your house without invitation.
It would probably cause me some concern.
Yes. So, he turns around and says, wait, what are you doing?
Yes, ma'am.
And for all you know, no telling what he had in his house, right?
I have no idea.
So you're certainly trying to imply here today that your suspicion is he had something to do with Holly in his house.
When I went in the house, it had nothing to do with Holly in his house. It had to
No,
do
no, no.
with him obtaining a weapon.
You're implying to the jury here today that the reason he was so nervous was his probably some kind of Holly evidence in his house. Is that what you're trying to suggest?
No, ma'am.
No.
I stepped in door.
I'm not talking about why you went in the house. You went in the house to make sure he wasn't getting a gun to shoot you.
True.
But what you're saying is the reason he was so nervous, the reason he didn't want you in the house. You suspect the reason he didn't want you in the house was because there could have been, or you suspect there was, either Holly's body in the house, Holly alive in the house, or some kind of evidence about Holly in the house.
Any of the above.
But that's your suspicion.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what you're clearly trying to indicate to the jury here today.
Yes.
Okay. But you would agree with me, it is just as likely that he could have had all kinds of drugs in the house, and that might be why he would be nervous.
Absolutely.
Because after all, you've already heard that he was involved in methamphetamine and other drugs.
Oh, yes, I know that for a fact.
Okay. So, besides the fact that he might have been nervous about having Holly in the house, he could have had marijuana plants growing in the house.
He probably could have, but I know where they were.
Okay.
Hundreds of them.
What?
I know where hundreds were right behind his house.
Okay. So, right behind his house, is it close to this cleared plot of suspicious land you saw out there?
Looks like the county property was used to grow marijuana.
Okay. So he has hundreds of marijuana plants growing right behind his house.
Yes.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're not to draw any inference whatsoever concerning the defendant's guilt or anything on this case based upon the fact that there might or might not have been marijuana plants on the property. That's not an issue before us. That's why I told the police just leave that.
And then you say that there's this mattress that's outside that you thought looked like a perfectly good mattress.
Yes.
Now, it's very possible that that mattress might have belonged to his girlfriend.
I have no idea who it belonged to.
Okay. And did you know at the time he had been living with the girlfriend on and off?
I have no idea.
Okay. So it's possible that that mattress might have been on its way to be moved out of the house.
I find that highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely that it's on its way to be moved back to a girlfriend's house?
Highly unlikely.
Why do you find that unlikely?
The mattress was leaned up against the house on the northeast corner. The carport is on the south side of the house.
Okay.
The front door is on the west side of the house.
Right.
This was near nothing.
But the master bedroom is off the back and it has a deck back there.
Ma'am, I don't know, but it was at the far north corner of the house.
But the far north corner of the house would be where the deck and the master bedroom are.
If it was going to be moved, why not leave it on the deck?
Would
You know,
you agree with me that people that use drugs don't always make the best decisions?
Oh, I know thousands of them that hadn't.
That haven't made the best decisions?
Correct.
Okay. But you would agree with me that, so you're also indicating here that you think that mattress was outside the house because it might have had some kind of evidence about Holly Bobo on it. Some kind of Holly Bobo evidence related to the mattress?
When I saw the mattress, it gave me the gut feeling of something is not right.
Okay. And so you're thinking that somebody that has evidence to hide might hide that evidence outside?
Could,
Okay.
yes.
If I can have just one more moment. Dylan Adams' truck was stopped. You're aware of what came from that, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. It turned out that there was no evidence related to the disappearance of Holly Bobo in Dylan Adams' truck.
Not that I know of.
Okay. And were there any drugs in that truck when it was stopped?
I don't know, ma'am.
If there'd have been giant drug bust related to that, you would have heard about it.
Yes.
Okay. That's all you're on.
No further questions. All right. Take a lunch recess. We'll take 1 hour. They're bringing lunch in for you, so we'll confine it to an hour. Council, be ready to go at 1:20.